Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be getting back into one of my absolute favorite comic book series with East of West number 5. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. Now, if you watched last week's video, you may recall that I sounded horrible, and that was because I was dealing with a pretty severe cold and what I can only assume was a sinus infection, and to be fair, I'm still dealing with the last bastions of that in this video, though I do feel as though my voice sounds quite a bit better than it did last week, so hopefully it's not as grating to listen to this week's video for all of you who are tuning in. First published in August of 2013, we see that once again we are sticking with the same theme of cover. And this is something that lasts throughout the entirety of the East and West series. It's always a stark white bottom of the cover with a monochrome colored image on the top. And I understand that's divisive for some people in the sense that you don't get a lot of dynamic covers as a result of this. But I also really appreciate the idea that East of West wanted to have a consistent look throughout the entirety of this run. And in fairness, most of the books do have an alternate cover of some kind that looks completely different from this aesthetic. So if you wanted to have something different, you could search those out. Jonathan Hickman, writer. Nick Dragotta, artist. Frank Martin, colors. Russ Wooten, letters. And of course, we get the stark white page at the beginning that simply says, "Have you heard the message?" above this very reminiscent of the Triforce symbol from Zelda. The story begins with a small craft flying above a large, desolate forest as we see that there is an open pit right in the dead center of it. Now, this is not just some random pit, this is the lair of the beast. The craft in question is being piloted by none other than Bell Solomon, one of the Chosen. And as he enters, he states, "I've never been here before because I always told myself that I was better than all of you. But now I know that that's not the case. It's because this place actually terrifies me." We then see that he's actually speaking to Archibald Chamberlain, and he asks Chamberlain, "How do you stand coming here?" And Chamberlain tells him, "Oh, I frequent this place as often as I can because I love the zoo." We then see the inscription here, "Born of the East, child of the West, the one true son of America." We then, of course, get the big 2-page splash with the East of West logo, telling us that this is number 5, The Message. Now, generally, this kind of thing would annoy me where there's 2 full pages of real estate that are just taken up by almost nothing. But in the case of East of West, I actually think that this is a very specific and deliberate stylized design choice where the creators of this book want to make sure you know exactly what each individual issue's title is because the story is so important to the overall continuing narrative of this book. There's not a whole lot of Freak of the Week stuff going on in East of West. This is very much a story-driven, episodic narrative that needs to be appreciated in order without skipping anything. And I feel like this kind of plays into that. And in all honesty, I think it works beautifully and I really like it. We're then teleported back to New Shanghai, where we see Death and also Wolf and Crow sitting in the garden where we first saw Zhao Lian, but they are surrounded by a bunch of guards, which seems completely irrelevant to anything that the 3 of them would choose to do, given that we saw them slaughtering thousands of the PRA soldiers in the previous issue. So there's nothing these guards could ever do to stop Death, Wolf, and Crow if they decided they wanted to try anything. Crow then states she's here, and this is also the first time we see either her or Wolf speak in their animal forms. We then see Zhao Lian enter, and she asks Death, "What do you think of this garden?" She explains that it was designed by Mao III as a place of tranquility, but it has been her prison for the last 10 years. She then tells Death that he can stay here if he likes, but if he does, this is the place he'll be confined to. He won't be able to freely roam around New Shanghai. He states that he can't be held in a place like this, nor will he be. And Zhao Lian then coyly says, well, then leave. But then he responds by stating, I can't leave. I don't have what I came here for yet. We then go into a flashback where we see Zhao Lian as a child training and becoming a fearsome warrior, as she is, by the age of 16, a war master, and by the age of 20, a full-fledged death dealer. These are, of course, ranks in the PRA, which aren't fully explained in this issue, so we don't know exactly how high up the ladder that made her. But in this instance, she was dealing with a border skirmish happening on the southern border of the PRA's territory against a group of people who were in control of the Sonoran Desert. We don't know who these people are or why they were trying to encroach upon the PRA's territory, but a war between these two factions happened and the PRA emerged victorious. As we see Zhao Lian about to execute the leader, she looks behind her and sees Death along with the other three horsemen. She decides that she's going to deny him, and Death notices this. We also see that Death in this flashback is monochrome black instead of monochrome white, which is not explained fully how this has happened or what its significance is, but it is something to take note of. Also, this all was part of the message, apparently, as it says, a lotus of steel and without mercy finds mercy and not for mercy's sake. We then see that Death and Zhao Lian meet in Armistice, as the two of them seem to have an attraction to one another. Death gives her the crescent blade that is made of the moon, apparently, as it's stated in the narration. She takes this gift, and the two of them stay by the fire, enjoying each other's company, and then eventually embrace in a kiss, which is apparently also part of the message, as it's shown down here in the bottom corner, as it says, a lotus, the death and resurrection of love. So we are seeing a fulfillment of the message, which is supposed to be the guiding prophecy of the entire story and the motivating factor for the horsemen and the chosen and everyone else that's kind of just caught in the middle. And it explains, this stuff's been going on for a long time, as it's been 10 years since this flashback happened and where we are currently in the story. Back in the present, Zhao Lian explains that she has already been accepted as the supreme leader by the lesser houses of the PRA, and that the Chosen have sent emissaries to try and convince her to maintain the position that her father had with them. However, she has no interest in this and actually plans on going to war with all of the other nations. Death confirms that he's willing to stand by her side. However, she tells him that he will only complicate things, as dead men often do. She then puts her hand on his face and tells him that it's over. There's nothing here for you and that things have changed. But Death kind of gets angry about this and states that nothing has changed, that his heart is all aflutter from seeing her once again, and that, he thought that she would be happy to see him. She then tells him, you look different. Now, this, of course, would be in reference to his complete color change that I spoke of on the previous pages. But Death kind of ignores this for a moment and tells her that, staying here on the mortal plane was no easy feat, and that it cost him dearly to forego his death, quote unquote, and resurrection that we saw the other three horsemen go through, where they're now all children, but he is still in his adult form from their previous incarnation. He then tells Zhao Lian that she looks different as well. Now, this is obvious given that she's actually aged 10 years since the last time he saw her. Zhao Lian then says, I've gotten older. I die a little bit every day when I wake. And Death looks at her hand and states, they took your hands. Zhao Lian states, I've tried to replace that which I could, but you healed and I got worse. He kisses her hand and states, I'm sorry, but Zhao Lian rebukes this, stating that's not good enough. He looks up at her and says, I love you, but then she becomes visibly angry and states, then why weren't you there when I needed you most? We then go into another flashback where we see that Zhao Liang and Death eventually married and tried to run away with each other and get away from the Horsemen and the PRA and everything that was going on with the Chosen. Eventually, Zhao Liang became pregnant, and after she delivered her baby, we see that their child is of an all stark white skin like we see Death in the present. And the birth of this child also fulfills another part of the message, as the prophecy states, of the third but not of the three, a cup of a cup, a chalice of a chalice. Also, if you're wondering, this is a piece of blue painter's tape that is covering Zhao Liang's nipple. I don't like having to censor artwork on my channel, but unfortunately if I don't, I'll wind up in YouTube jail, so them's the breaks, I guess. We then see Death hang his head in shame as he admits that he wasn't there when he should have been, and it was due to the fact that he was misled and betrayed and he never saw it coming. Though we don't know exactly who it was that betrayed him at this point. He then tells Zhao Liang that he's paid for that, and the only thing he has left now is settling scores and trying to make good with the people he wronged. He tells Zhao that as soon as he found out that she was still alive, he came running, and then states that has to count for something. However, Zhao Liang does not agree with this, and she states there's no way that you can make this right. She is very angry and also sad as we see her begin to tear up as she states, "You made me believe in something that was a lie, us." She then tells him, they came and they took everything from me. They took my name and my hands. And then, as I watched helplessly, I saw war walk into our home and silence the cries that beckoned her there. They killed our son. And at that moment, I cursed your name, and I curse you once again today. We then see in another flashback, Death leaving the home that the two of them had made with one another. And while Zhao Liang did not want him to leave, she refused to beg him to stay as this was beneath her. However, we then see after losing her battle with the Horsemen and being betrayed by her sister, she is unable to fight back any longer as her hands have both been cut off. And at this moment, when she realizes that war is heading for her home to take her son, she does in fact beg and try to plead with war so that her son will be spared and ask for mercy. However, she is granted none as we see War walk into her home, standing above her baby and preparing for the worst. Death then looks up at Zhao and asks her, "You've never actually heard the message, have you?" Zhao actually believes this is a ridiculous question as she informs Death, I didn't care for any of that when we were together, and I've been in this garden ever since you left, so how would I have known it? My father never spoke of such things, and he didn't discuss his dealings with the Chosen with me. However, at this point, we see her begin another sentence, and then Death cuts her off as he stands up and takes her shoulder in his hand. He tells her that the message is what dictates all of what the Chosen do, and it's also what guides the Horsemen along their path, and that none of them would ever dare stray from the words of the message. He then embraces her and tells her, "Before I found out that you were still alive, myself and the two witches have been hunting everywhere." He whispers in her ear, I thought you were dead, but our son." Zhao then pushes him away in tears, stating, "Our son what?" And she begins to sob uncontrollably, overcome with the grief of the loss of her child once again. However, at this point, Death recites a portion of the message to her, stating, "A cup of a cup, a chalice of a chalice, the vessel that will light the world and set all men aflame." He then looks at her with a steel gaze and says, "Our son is alive, Zhao. They would never dream of killing him," as we see her suddenly shocked as the tears continue to stream down her face, now knowing that her son, who she believed long gone, is in fact still alive and well. Death then explains to Zhao that the Horsemen and the Chosen believe that their son is the beast of the apocalypse, as we see the prison that he's been kept in since he was taken away by war. We then see that Belle Solomon and Archibald Chamberlain are looking down at the child as Solomon explains, "Just look at what we've done to this child, all of our sins. What are we going to do about this now?" And Chamberlain asks about what, the child or our sins? And Bel Solomon says both. He then explains that he wanted to meet here because the others are all true believers. Now, of course, Chamberlain, in his typical manner, tries to keep the conversation flowing at a pace that he would rather have, as he asks them, "Are you questioning my faith? You wound me, Bel." And Solomon then explains, "I never believed in any of this. The only reason I ever joined the Chosen is because I believed selling my soul to this cause was the only way I could ever protect my nation from the power-hungry and the ambitious, and to try and make sure that we remained a sovereign country in all of this." He then tells Chamberlain that he now knows, after seeing all this, that all of it's true and that they're going to try and bring about the end of the world. Chamberlain simply smiles then and states, "Yeah, it's going to be a grand show, don't you think?" However, Bel Solomon is not amused in any way, as he looks over at Chamberlain and simply asks him, "Do you really think that this is amusing? Just take a look down there at what we've created and then tell me what's so funny." We then see that the child for the past 10 years has been locked up in this cell, receiving an education/brainwashing from what is either an artificial intelligence or a cybernetic brain enclosed in this sphere. We're not sure as of yet, as he's given information and asked questions. One of the interesting questions that he's asked in this moment is to list several forms of governance in order of importance and then explain his methodology. So his response is limited meritocracy, oligarchy, functional individual autonomy, and liberal democracy. The sphere asks why, and the child responds by stating that he's been taught that what man truly desires is conflict, then to be ruled, then opportunity, and if all those fail, freedom. He's then asked by the sphere to recite a poem that he enjoys, and after he does so, the sphere states, "I'm not familiar with that work, who wrote it?" And the child responds stating that he did. The sphere then asks him, and this is the most interesting question of all, "How do you feel?" And the boy responds by stating, "I don't know what that means." Meanwhile, Solomon tells Chamberlain they believe that when this is all done, that boy will be the beast of the apocalypse, and that's why we need to stop them. I need your help in doing that. Chamberlain responds by stating, "Why on earth would I ever help you to stop them?" And Bel Solomon responds by stating, "Because it's what needs doing. It's just and it's right." However, Chamberlain scoffs at this, stating, "Bel, do you even hear yourself right now? Just, right? Next thing you're going to be doing is telling me that all men are created equal or some such nonsense. I'm really embarrassed for you at this point." However, Bel Solomon begins to lose his patience as he states, "You know, Chamberlain, this is crazy. They're trying to bring about the end of the world. They want to destroy everything and then burn the pieces that are left. Are you really just going to stand by and watch it happen?" And Chamberlain states that of course not. He's not happy for this, but that he is excited about the prospects that it brings, basically stating that his intentions are to survive the apocalypse and then profit on whatever's left and enrich himself even further. Solomon finally becomes so frustrated that he decides to leave, but as he walks off, he states to Chamberlain, "So I suppose you'll be telling the other chosen about what I said here today." Chamberlain, however, dismisses this, stating that his forms of entertainment are far more provocative. He then, however, gets a little bit angry and states, "You know, Solomon, you need to wake up. You need to realize that we're at the beginning of a great game, and I'm a man who's willing to kick over a few of the pieces." Solomon responds, though, with words that we've seen in other books, but we didn't know who was speaking them at the time. He states, "It's not a game. This is the world. It's not the one we were supposed to have, but it's the one we made. We did this. We did this with open eyes and with willing hands. We broke it, and there's no putting it back together." But he then ends this by stating, "But I'm damned already, so I may as well try." Chamberlain just laughs this off as he tells him, "Well, go ahead and do your best, Solomon. Just remember, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on you." And as we see him once again take a puff of his cigar, he states, "Go ahead and try and save the world. See what good it does you." Meanwhile, back in New Shanghai, we see that Death is mounting up on his steed as he's preparing to leave. He tells Zhao that he knows she's still angry, but he's glad that he could finally tell her the truth. He then asks her if she wants to join him. However, she states once again, "I told you, things are already over between us. However, I'm going to bring a war the likes of which the world has never seen to the Chosen, and you need to use the distraction of that war to your advantage so that you can find our son." She then tells him, "You have to bring him back to me. And remember that if you don't, there's nowhere in this world that you'll ever be able to hide from me." Death accepts this, stating that he'll not fail in this task, and that once he finds their son, he's going to bring him back, and he's going to come back and reclaim Xiao as well. And on the final page of this story, we see Death riding into the sunset, accompanied by Wolf and Crow, as he simply states, "God help anyone who tries to get in my way." And then, of course, we just get a big blank white page with the logo on the bottom. This probably could have been used for something, I don't know, other than just a blank white page, even an advertisement, something where they could have made a little bit more money. I don't know. We then get an ad for the comics Sex Criminals and Velvet. Truth be told, I never read either of these books. If you have and would like to talk about them in the comments below, feel free to do so. I'm actually interested if they were any good. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for Century West, and on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for Pretty Deadly, featuring the creative work of Kelly Sue DeConnick. Again, I've never read either of these two books. I do recall them existing, but if you have any extra information that you'd like to talk about in the comments below, feel free to do so, because I'm always interested in learning new stuff about books that I haven't read before. And that was East of West number 5. Obviously, nowhere near as action-packed as the previous issue. However, I really liked this issue just for how much new story we got out of it. We learned about the romance that happened between Zhao and Death, of the existence of their son, and the fact that Death has actually been on a quest to find him for the past decade. We also learned that there's dissent happening amongst the Chosen, and that Belle Solomon is not on board with what they're trying to accomplish. We also realize that the Chosen and the Horsemen will not deviate from the message itself and are kind of locked on this path toward the apocalypse. And that realistically, unless some wild card decides to try and go after Zhao and Death's son, he's not really facing any danger from the main antagonists of the story. We also learned that Zhao is planning on starting a full-scale war with the rest of the other nations. And this is really where the story itself starts to legitimately kick off in a huge way. It's such a big jumping off point from the previous 4 issues, whereas before we kind of just were following Death in his pursuit to rescue his wife. And now we're opened up into this gigantic world story that was kind of just being told in the background up until this point. And it really gets wild from here. I'm really excited to continue on with this so that you can all see where the story goes from this point forward. Now then again, I'm pretty biased. These are all my opinions. I really love East of West. I make no, bones about that. And I realize that I'm looking at this through the most rose-colored of glasses, and that your opinions may be different. You might think that there's too much going on in this story, and that perhaps, they shouldn't have abandoned the storyline of Death trying to save his wife and kept that going for a little bit longer, and that the whole secondary plot that involves the Horsemen and the Chosen seems to clutter things up. And if that's the case, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.